Hi, this is Dr. Felice Gersh, and I'm so happy to have an opportunity to speak with you about testing. What about testing for COVID? Well, as we know, there's been a shortage of tests, but say you had the option of any test you wanted. What would you do? Or say you don't have the option. You need to know every test's pros and cons and how to use it correctly so that you can interpret the results. So let's talk about the rapid antigen tests. They can identify the actual virus, but they have to have a fairly substantial amount of virus in order to detect it. And it's a swab typically of the nasal cavities, sometimes of the mouth. And in fact, they now know that the Omicron variant of COVID probably has more concentration in saliva, but many of the tests are not designed, and sometimes people are using saliva anyway, but you should know what it's approved for and what it isn't so that you know the limitations of the test. Now, in order to utilize the rapid antigen test, you have to have, as I said, a substantial amount of virus present. So if you don't, if it's very early in the course, someone doesn't have a heavy viral load, the test can be negative even though the virus is actually present and the person is actually either beginning the infection or just hasn't really had the opportunity to grow more virus in them, or they're fortunate and they're not going to grow a very heavy viral load, which would, by the way, imply that they're probably not as contagious. So if you wanted to get a test to know if you have COVID, the rapid antigen test is okay, but know that it can have more false negatives simply because the virus hasn't accumulated in enough quantity to actually turn the test positive. Now, if you wanted a test to know if you're no longer infectious, well, there actually is no such test. There is no test that says 100% you're not infectious. That just doesn't exist. But the test that you would use to give you at least some reasonable idea would be the rapid antigen test, because once again, if you're no longer infectious, the numbers of viral particles will go down, and at that point, when you have less viral load, you're going to be less infectious. So just so you know, statistically, by monitoring, it appears that once you're out about 7 days, about maybe 1/3 of people, this is from when you first were tested positive and you started having symptoms, about a week later, the chance that you're infectious is probably about 33%. But if you just add another day, at about 8 days, your chance of being infectious has dropped to only about 11%. You can never say someone is no longer infectious. We're going by the odds. That's how we live life in medicine. We go by statistics and odds so we can make rational decisions. Now, what about the PCR test? Well, that's an amplification of DNA present. So you can have someone who has COVID, and early on, they will have a very small amount. Well, the PCR test is more likely to be positive than the rapid antigen because you don't need to have a high viral load for the PCR test to become positive because there's an amplification process in that test. So of even a little bit of the genetic material from the virus will be amplified and they can actually find it. So then you would be positive that you have the virus in you. That doesn't mean you're infectious. It means that they have detected a little bit of virus. Now, the problem with that is that a little bit of virus can stay detectable for a long time, even a few weeks after you're no longer contagious, you have no symptoms, and you're actually fine. So the PCR test is really a very poor test to use as a return to work, that now you're not contagious any longer, because it can say it's positive and you're not contagious. So just keep in mind, the PCR is more sensitive than the rapid antigen and will detect the virus at a much lower amount. And it's an excellent test to use to see if you're infected very early on in the infection, whereas you may have to wait a little longer for the rapid antigen test. The rapid antigen test results typically come back much faster though, so it has a great deal of utility once you have enough viral load. in terms of return to work or when you're no longer contagious, there is absolutely no guarantee at any point. However, statistically, if the PCR test is positive, it's meaningless because the PCR test can say positive long after you're no longer contagious because it can detect very tiny amounts of viral particles that still may be present, whereas the rapid antigen test is the better test to use for return to work if such a thing is going to be utilized, because once the antigen is negative, it means the viral load is very low and you're probably not contagious, though no one can guarantee that. Just know as much as you can so you can make the best decisions for yourself and to advise your family members. I look forward to seeing you next time. Take care, stay safe. Have a good day.